Welcome to Short Story Theatre. Today's brief tale reads like a narrative of the Old West, but it happened just a short time ago, in a place where horses haven't totally been replaced by speeding cars, and they still have gunfights in the bars. It's a fantasy of greed, revenge, and retribution, that we call, Stranger in a Saloon. Here now is your moderator, so please, listen up. Won't you?
As we enter the second decade of the 21st century, the United States is deep into the ages, the space age, the computer age, the pride age, and others too plentiful to name. The children of the present era are born with smartphones in their hands, and YouTube videos in their heads. Despite this, there remain hundreds of areas in the 48 interlocking states, where even today there is no cell phone service, no internet, no GPS, and no cable television. In the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, there are less than 20 people per square mile. In parts of Arizona, northern Maine, and West Texas, there are a number of communities, resembling more closely villages of the late 1800s, than those of the 2000s. This story takes place in the West Texas desert, in the tiny village of Flaco. From Pete's General Store on Main Street, you could go west for 500 miles before hitting another town. To the other points of the compass, there are no settlements for nearly 100 miles. Flaco has electricity and landline telephones, but not much else. There's no GPS tracking, no cable TV, and internet service is non-existent. Guns worn on hips are a common sight, while cell phones and digital watches are not. The only tablets to be found are in aspirin bottles in Smith's drugstore. The sheriff and his deputy have an old 1990 Crown Vic cruiser that they rescued from a junkyard in Houston, but often as not, they travel by mule or horse to complete their daily rounds. Local residents are able to listen to a few radio stations located east of town, but no live television is available. The town library has a substantial collection of VHS tapes that are very popular. People are starting to get DVD machines, though the library has yet to start stocking DVD discs. John Marston had a small spread on the outskirts of the town. He had extreme good fortune in locating an underground spring on his land, which gave him an abundant source of water. That precious liquid was worth twice its weight in gold, in a parched area where sometimes it doesn't rain for 6 months on end, and summertime highs can easily top 100 degrees. Surrounding Marston's tiny 90-acre ranch was Whip Blander's Circle W outfit, that consisted of 5,000 water-starved, scrubby acres. He ran a fairly successful cattle spread, but was unable to expand, because of the lack of adequate water resources. Whip tried to buy out Marston, but John refused to sell. Growing increasingly bitter, Whip decided that if he had to, he'd kill Marston in order to get his ranch. Whip was a pretty fair gun hand, and word was that he had made his money running a crooked faro game in Kansas. John Marston liked to play poker on Saturday nights at the Cottonwood Crossing bar. One night Marston was playing, and there was an open seat. Whip Blander got in the game. Blander was very skilled with the pasteboards, and could deal from the bottom of the deck better than just about anybody else in the West. He cheated all night, and went undetected, and even unsuspected, until he won all the money Marston had brought. He offered John a bargain. Whip said that Marston himself could deal out 5 cards. 4 would belong to John and 1 to Whip. High card would win. Whip bet all the money he had won, as well as his own ranch against Marston's tiny spread. He said to Marston, "You get to shuffle. You get to deal, and you get 4 cards to my 1. I want your ranch. Mine's not worth much without the water, so I am willing to buck these huge odds for a chance at your place." Unseen, Marston palmed the ace of spades before he handed the deck over to his opponent for the deal. After the 5 cards were laid out face down on the table, he picked up his card. He secretly pulled the ace of spades from his sleeve and swapped it for the card he was dealt. Marston's highest card was a queen. He lost to the ace. He was infuriated and he said that he knew he'd been cheated. Whip goaded him into a gunfight and put 3 slugs into him, before John had a chance to clear leather. The law could not do anything to Whip, even though the sheriff knew that it was actually murder. Blander took over the ranch and immediately brought in an additional 2,000 head of cattle. With his newfound source of water, his operation was thriving. Whip kept expanding the spread, and all went well for a few years, until one night a stranger showed up at the table at the Saturday night poker game in the Cottonwood Crossing Saloon. He was ghastly pale, in contrast to the sunburned ranchers and cowboys. The unknown outsider who had drifted into town was doing very well at the table. He was ahead about $700 when Whip joined the game. Whip Blander smiled as he sat in on the game. He was going to let the greenhorn win a few hands and then clean him out. But the plan went sour. Somehow, no matter how much he cheated, the new man always came out on top. By midnight Whip was down $3,000. By 1 a.m. he had lost almost all the cash he had brought with him, over $5,000. The stranger offered to put all of his winnings in, for one final hand. He would put in over $7,000 against Whip's last $100, as long as Whip also put up the ranch, as part of the bet. Whip was suspicious. The stranger upped the ante. "I will still have one card but you can have 4 cards, he said. As one voice, the cowhands and bar girls circling the table, gasped. Whip was still reluctant, but he quietly said, "Okay. I'll make you a bargain," said the stranger, "I will let you deal. You can deal 4 cards to you and just 1 to me. High card wins. You get 4 chances to my 1. But before you deal, roll up your sleeves and count the cards. I want to make sure that there are 52 in the deck and none in your sleeves." It was the biggest game in the history of the town. A large crowd had gathered around the table, and they expected that there was no way Whip Blander was going to take an insult like that. Normally, they would have been fighting words guaranteed to promote gunplay, but for some reason, Whip Blander took water. He didn't challenge the newcomer. Silently, he rolled up his sleeves and accepted the deck of cards. Without a word dealt out his 4, and then 1 to the mysterious greenhorn with the pasty white face. Whip had a 7, a 9, a jack and a king. The stranger tuned over his card. It was the ace of spades. Whip knew he'd been cheated, in exactly the same way he cheated John Marston. Whip began to goad the pale-faced card shark. He accused him of cheating, and demanded that he draw on him. The stranger said to Whip, "Didn't you notice that I'm not armed? I don't carry a gun." After hearing this news, Whip Blander got louder and bolder. He figured the kid would be easy pickings. He speculated that although the greenhorn was good with cards, he wouldn't be much with a gun. He kept prodding the newcomer until finally the stranger borrowed a gun from a cowpoke and examined it. Everyone could plainly see right off that the kid was a surgeon with the weapon. He handled it as if it were an extension of his fingers. Now, Whip began to sweat. He wanted to back out, he would have too. But the stranger said that he could draw first. "I won't even start my draw till you clear leather." Now Whip was shaking, and when he drew he didn't get the gun cleanly out of the holster, it snagged, and the stranger drew, and fired so fast that nobody even saw the draw. They only were able to spy the smoke from the barrel, after the stranger's bullet went straight into Whip's heart. "I'll be going out to the ranch now," said the newcomer. "Not so fast," barked the sheriff. "I know Whip was no good, and he got the best part of his ranch by cheating at cards, but I think you did the same thing." "Well, Sheriff, I don't guess you can prove that, any more than you could when that man lying dead on the floor cheated another man, John Marston. Whip cheated him at cards, and then shot him. That man John Marston had hardly ever handled a gun in his life." "How would you know that?" the sheriff asks. "I got out of prison a couple days ago, Sheriff. I had no money, no car, no horse and no prospects. I started walking, heading for no particular place. Just by chance or by fate, I walked by a ragged hut. An old woman was outside, cooking over an open fire. I was hungry and the food smelled good. I asked her if she could spare me a meal. She had very little, but she fed me. And she told me a story. A tale of how her husband had been cheated out of his ranch by Whip Blander, and how she was evicted from the ranch she had helped to build. After I heard what happened to her, I decided to try and straighten out my life, and to try and make up for the bad things I've done." "So you came here and killed Whip Blander for that old lady?" asked the sheriff. "Yes. I killed Whip Blander for that old lady, Mrs. John Marston. I'm giving her back her ranch. She'll be moving in later today. You see, Sheriff, I was bad all my life. I ran away from home when I was 10. I've been no good. My folks disowned me many years ago. They were so ashamed of me they never even told people they had a son. And I don't think they ever even said my name. By the way, it's Marston, John Marston, Jr."
And so closes Stranger in a Saloon, written by Bill Russo. We leave it to you to decide if the pale-faced stranger just out of prison really was the son of the old lady cooking over an open fire, or just an ex-con who decided to become a knight of the poker table. Thanks for listening, and please come back soon. Won't you?